What's going on, everybody? This is Randall Barnes, the founder of HBCU Pulse and the host of HBCU Pulse Radio, in the building for another special edition of the show on today, where we are live and we're covering the Stacey Abrams, Brian Kemp debate, which was definitely a different debate than what we saw with Herschel Walker and Senator Raphael Warnock. Very refreshing, I must say, although we still got some things to talk about on this evening. First and foremost, thank you all for coming out. On Friday, we had a really good time. A lot of great stuff, a lot of great conversations. And thank you all for watching the show. We had, I think, 8,000 concurrent viewers on Friday, and then it ended up at 11,000 on the replay. So we really appreciate you. We appreciate your comments, good and bad, and all of that. So we're going to get into a lot of great things on today. So I want to let you all know we're streaming live on HBCU Pulse Twitter. We're streaming live, of course, on YouTube and also on HBCU Pulse Channel 201 on HBCU League Pass Plus. So make sure to check us out on all of those platforms. If you want your comment to be spotlighted, you can buy a super chat on YouTube. We have a segment where we're going to spotlight those super chats. So make sure that you look for that as well. And also, if you want to donate to us, help us out, you know what I mean? You can cash up us at HBCU Pulse, $ HBCU Pulse, or send us a donation at PayPal at HBCU Pulse. And of course, the general conversations that I want to pose to our chat is that the Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp debate change how you feel about the Georgia Senate race. Also, how confident are you that Stacey Abrams will win this race versus Brian Kemp? All right. So here's the thing, right? I want to go over what's at stake before we bring in our guest, Genesis and Anaya. They did an amazing job on Friday. We have them back. But I want to go over the stakes of this race, right? Because I think that it's important to understand why this race is important. Here's what's going on, right? The governor's seat is incredibly important. Honestly, is arguably more important than the executive level of government, because local and state governance controls our lives. And also, we saw during the pandemic, we've seen during congressional infighting that governors have a lot of power that they enact to stop things that happen on the executive level. So I want to talk about the platforms of Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp, and also where they differ on issues. So we're going to start with Brian Kemp. So his platform title is A Safer, Stronger Georgia. So if you're an HBCU student, you're very familiar with platform titles. Not an acronym. I always joke around. Like, HBCU students love acronyms. Not an acronym. Both of them know they're acronyms. But his platform is A Safer, Stronger Georgia. His priorities are centered around inflation relief and K-12 education. But in his platform, he really centered on what he's been doing as governor. And he's campaigning on his record. He's campaigning on economics, public safety, healthcare, election integrity, and Georgia values for all. Now, what's the difference between Herschel Walker and Brian Kemp? They're both Republicans. Well, Herschel Walker is a football player. He played at the University of Georgia. Didn't graduate. All right. Brian Kemp has been in government for a minute. So from 2003 to 2007, he served as a member of the Georgia State Senate. Then from 2010 to 2018, he served as the 27th Secretary of State for Georgia, which we all saw as a little bit of a problem. Stacey Abrams, he spoke about that on tonight, where it's like, hey, like, you're the Secretary of State, but, you know, you're running for governor, and it's a lot of funny things going on with voting. That's like me playing basketball, being a referee. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you're Secretary of State, and you're running for governor. Don't you think you should give that seat up? He didn't do that. He won. I ain't saying nothing, but he won. I'm not saying anything. But he currently serves as the 83rd governor, and this is a fun fact. He received more votes than any gubernatorial candidate in Georgia history up to this point. So what Brian Kemp is a capable politician. He's been here before. He's done this before. That's the real difference between him and Herschel Walker. And also, I think temperament as well, because I don't think that you're looking at Brian Kemp to say, hey, can he be a leader? He's already the leader. So now what he's doing is sort of defending his record and saying, listen, I'm still the guy that Republicans can get behind, but I'm also trying to get moderate voters. That's what Brian Kemp is at this point. Now, Ms. Abrams, Stacey Abrams, Spelman College alum, her platform is One Georgia, and she's real big on making changes in the system from the governor's seat. In her platform, she talks about economic mobility, educational mobility, social mobility, housing affordability, healthcare with a specific emphasis on reproductive freedom, military families and veteran support, rural revitalization, environmental action and resilience, safety and justice, voting rights, and ethics and public integrity. So here's where they differ. They differ on several issues, but I want to spotlight 4 that I thought were interesting and will be interesting to the HBCU community and our viewers watching. So, of course, on abortion, Kemp passed the heartbeat bill. And if you don't know what the heartbeat bill is, it banned abortions after the heartbeat is detected, which is around 6 weeks. And typically, like a woman that is pregnant doesn't know she's pregnant around 6 weeks. You know, so you can't get an abortion after 6 weeks under the heartbeat bill. And they hopped on that heavy after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Now, Ms. Abrams believes that she believes in a woman's right to choose, and she's consistently bashed Brian Kemp on his restrictions to reproductive rights. All right. So education. So this was something that was brought up in the debate today. So Brian Kemp campaigned in 2018 to raise teachers' salaries in Georgia by $5,000, which by my research, he did do that. He also did it for the University System of Georgia officials, 100,000 of them. I found that in research. This campaign, he's pledging to allocate $65 million to combat learning losses suffered by Georgia students during COVID-19. Now, Ms. Abrams, she has a $1.65 billion plan to raise the salary of teachers in the state of Georgia to $50,000 a year at minimum. Because, you know, if you're a doctor and you have different advanced degrees, you get more money. I know that because my mom's teacher. So I'm rooting for that. I need her to get that extra money. You know what I'm saying? I'm rooting for my mom, all right? And I know a lot of people that are teachers that graduated. I know a lot of teachers, they definitely deserve it. Teachers are the backbone, really, of our society, right? So she wants to also revamp how schools are funded and the voucher system for private schools, which could really be a game changer. So I thought gambling was really interesting. So what you're seeing in the media now, you have the NFL season that's going on. You have college football. Of course, UGA is the national champions. And you have basketball that's going to be starting back on tomorrow. Super excited for that. I was wearing a Falcons jersey. I was wearing a Deion Sanders Falcons jersey. It's cool. All right. Shout out to Deion Sanders. All right. So here's the thing. Brian Kemp actually opposes legalizing casinos in Georgia, but he isn't against an amendment that Georgia voters can vote on to approve casinos in Georgia and betting that's legalized in Georgia. What was really interesting, Stacey Abrams promised to legalize casinos and sports betting in Georgia, and the money that's accrued from it will go to the Hope scholarships and also to create a new need-based scholarship for Georgia college students. I like that. Like I said, I like that. You know, HBCU Pulse. I was in college. I'm paying Sally Mae. Man, listen, if y'all want to bet on the games, the over and under, and I get some money for a scholarship, I like that. I like that plan a lot. You know, so I just graduated. So I like that a lot. So voting rights. All right. So last thing I want to spotlight, right? So voting rights, Brian Kemp signed into law SB 202. We had Genesis coming on. She's going to go more in depth on that, right? But essentially what SB 202 did, it made it significantly harder to vote. Now, Brian Kemp, like how Herschel Walker said about Raphael Warnock, he'll sweet talk you. He'll sweet talk you because it'll make it seem like it didn't hurt because you had a lot of black folks that came out to vote. You had a lot of minority groups that came out to vote. He'll sweet talk you. But at the same time, when you look at it, it does make it harder to vote. And it criminalizes certain factors of voting. But also, you look at the dichotomy of it. Ms. Abrams supports rules that allow voters to register until Election Day. She wants to create more mobile voting precincts, and she's also against the redrawing of state and federal maps with gerrymandered districts. So it's a lot that's on the line in this election. And I want to lay that out before we get into the opinion, before we get into the bombast and all these different things. That's why this is important. The governor's race has a lot at stake. Even for folks that want to bet on their favorite team and make some money. And, you know, like, because you can't do that in Georgia right now. In other states, you can do that. So it's a lot on the line right now, and it's a lot at stake. And we need to go out and vote. And I encourage everyone to go out and vote. So we're going to talk more about that as we move forward. But it's almost the top of the hour. We're about to bring Genesis and Anaya on. Anaya is the NAACP president at my alma mater, Fort Valley State University. You have Genesis Ivy, who is in student government. She's SGA. She's a legislative secretary. She deals in the Senate in SGA, doing a lot of amazing things. And she's been doing a lot of great things with getting college students registered to vote. So it's 9 o'clock. Let's go on and bring him in so we can talk about what's going on in this gubernatorial race. Genesis, Anaya, how y'all doing today?
We're good. How are you?
Good. How are you?
We are amazing in here. So check it out. So I laid out what was at stake, right? I laid the whole entire thing out. So now we're going to get into the opinion piece of how we felt about the debate. But before I start, I want to get your opinion on how you all felt about, the gubernatorial race before this debate. So I want to start with you, Genesis. How did you feel about the gubernatorial race before this debate even happened?
Well, it's almost like Miss Abrams, almost like not revenge, but it's like the rematch, so to speak, with Governor Kemp having the previous position of Secretary of State. It already put her at a disadvantage, and I feel as though this race is a chance for it to be fair. He's governor and she's running for governor, so perhaps that those disparities will not exist anymore. But with SB 202 and other things of that nature, we can't forget that those things still exist. So that's how I feel.
Most definitely. So I want to talk to you tonight because you had a lot to say. We were texting in the group chat. You had a lot to say. We're going to get to that. So before the debate, how were you and how are you feeling about the state of the gubernatorial race?
I feel like Stacy has a lot to prove this time go around. She didn't win the last governor's race. So now I think after watching the debate, she's coming harder and she wants to win.
She does. Mm-hmm. And one thing I'll say off rip is that I look at, I'm a communicator. I'm a writer. So I look at communication. And one thing I saw this go around is that Stacey Abrams was on the attack. Like she was on offense from jump to prove, hey, Brian Kemp, his policies are dangerous for Georgia. And you saw Brian Kemp be more reserved. He wasn't really on the attack. He was using a lot of what I call shields. He was using his records as shields, and he was using black folks and minority voters and women as shields as well. Because according to him, every black person in Georgia is voting. We know that is not the case. We know like SB 202 is ensuring that a lot of black folks ain't voting. But according to him, black folks are voting. It's up. Why y'all worry about SB 202? It ain't a problem. That's essentially what he was doing the whole entire debate. And then you had a libertarian that was there. And we're not going to really talk a lot about him a lot. Shane Hazel, that's his name. And it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was sort of funny. They announced him as a podcaster. So I was like, podcasters stand up. We on the gubernatorial stage. Like, no, podcasters stand up. But he didn't, like, at first I was like, you know what? I'm not upset at a different point of view that's pushing both Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. But at the same time, he started to sort of get on my nerves a little bit, just to be 100% honest, because he started to take up time. And also it's like, it's only an hour. And then he started to chip away at talking points and go on the attack really heavy. So I wasn't a big fan of his participation, especially what he did at the end. So we're not going to talk a lot about him. All right, we're going to stick on Brian Kemp and Stacey Abrams. Yes, Genesis, we can hear you. We can hear you, Genesis. We can hear you. So let's start with the first question in the debate that was after the opening statements from the candidates. All right, so let's go down to that. So the first question was for Stacey Abrams. Why are you behind in every poll with Georgia supporting expansion of Medicaid and reproductive rights? That was a very loaded question by the Atlanta Press Club, basically saying that, listen, Stacey Abrams, you losing all these polls, but Georgians support what you campaigning for. What's going on, sis? That's sort of how I took it. I'm like, that's a loaded question to start the debate. So I want to start with you, Nyla. How do you think Stacey Abrams answered that question?
I think she answered it well. She said she is here for the people of Georgia. So she's behind the women's right to choose. She's behind education. She's behind all of that. So with her numbers in the polls, I don't believe they're fully allocated for, I don't think every poll is correct as of right now. So I think she answered it well.
I think so too. And there's a big margin of error in those polls as well. And of course, we know what happened in 2016. We cannot trust the polls. So I think that is a big thing. You're totally correct. So Genesis, with this question, she asked, why are you behind? He asked, why are you behind every poll with Georgians supporting expansion of Medicaid and reproductive rights? Now, I sauced up the question a little bit, but not that much because it was already saucy. All right. That question was already saucy, but I sort of reworded it because, they were asking a lot of complex questions. It was hard to listen and write at the same time. But basically, it's like, so people support reproductive rights. They support expansion of Medicaid. You're the candidate that's proposing that. Why are you behind in the polls? So how do you think she answered that? Do you think she did it well, or do you think that she could have answered it better?
I think she did a great job. I feel as though with a question like that, you don't have a choice but to just kind of answer it in the most vague way possible. But I think that she did a pretty good job. She's going to always put the people of Georgia first, as Anaya said. And I feel like that's going to be her superpower all the time because she actually is an advocate for the people of Georgia. She cares about the people of Georgia. She's not so focused on, I guess, the economy and things of that nature are important, but she's going to put health and, the woman's right to choose first before anything else.
Exactly. So I want to segue into the question that was for Brian Kemp, which I thought was a really good question. And the question was, and I paraphrased it, can you tell us if you back ban of contraceptions, and also like they briefly sort of talked about his stance against reproductive rights. They asked him, do you back these measures? So that's one thing that for a lot of us, we're out here like, so wait, so first you're trying to ban a woman's right to choose. Now you're trying to ban condoms? Because that was the talking point I was hearing, where it's like, so now that's going to be the big thing? That's weird. That's weird. So what you're doing is, this is how I look at it. What you're doing is you're taking away a woman's right to choose. It's her body. And now you're taking away the protection that men and women can have, not only against pregnancy, but sexually transmitted diseases. So it's like, that is sort of odd. And it's going to be a lot of folks that's like, well, you trying to ban condoms? Like, just in layman's terms, trying to ban condoms? What the world? So I think he answered it very interestingly, where he's like, well, no, not trying to do that. But, so because I think that's sort of like, you trying to ban condoms, dude, what's wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? So I want to start with you tonight. How do you think Brian Kemp answered that question?
Now, I just want to start off by saying, when Roe v. Wade first got overturned, the conversation about banning contraceptions did come into play. A lot of states did say they were going to do that, where there wouldn't be any Plan Bs or condoms moving forward. Now, as far as them going into action, I'm not too sure about that right now. But him answering that question, he seemed very weary to me, not very confident. So it's like, you passed the bill, the heartbeat bill. Now stand on what you mean and plan on to do afterwards.
I totally agree. Let's say it with the chest, Brian Kemp. That's what we're saying right here. Because you said you with it. Listen, don't backtrack now, because you see people are with the woman's right to choose. You know what I'm saying? So I want to go to you, Genesis. So how did you feel about this? Because it was an interesting question, and I saw the incumbent governor squirm a little bit. So what do you think about how you answered the question? I think we're waiting on Genesis to come in. Genesis, let me know you come in. But what I'll say is
right,
this.
it's giving like very much walking on eggshells.
Go ahead, Genesis. Go ahead. We experiencing lag. Go ahead, Genesis. We're experiencing a lag. Cox cable sucks, y'all. I'm not gonna lie to you. We're experiencing a lag, Genesis. If you can hear me, keep going. We hear you. We keep going. Yes, keep going. We hear you, Genesis. Keep going.
Okay. My stance on it. He's not confident, as Anaya said. It's like he's trying to appeal to a certain group of people in Georgia, which is going to be those older, white people that feel a certain way.
So I think that's true, because it's like what he's trying to do is he's trying to appear as moderate as possible, because you have conservative policies that are very to the right, and a lot of folks don't rock with them, but you want to appear as if you're sane, but also you want to appeal to that base, because also what he's trying to do is that he wasn't Trump's back candidate, because Trump is very much into a lot of these midterm races. Even though he's losing a little bit of clout and a little bit of standing in a lot of these midterm races, he still has an influence. So you have to win over the Trump base and then get your moderate Republicans to back you, because there was some moderate Republicans that voted for President Biden in Georgia, and also some moderate Republicans that did flip over and voted blue with Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. So now he's trying to sort of appeal to multiple demographics, and he's doing that by using his record and saying, hey, I am a conservative, but I am moderate. So what Stacey Abrams trying to paint me as, that's not what I am. But I want to move on to actually what the Libertarian posed to Brian Kemp. He said something to Brian Kemp about cannabis, and then Brian Kemp, he countered that by talking about going against street gangs and cartels. Now, once again, if you're joining, we're not going to talk too much about Mr. Shane Hazel. To be honest, I don't know why he was there. I really don't know why. But I thought it was very interesting that he went into, we talking about cannabis, he went into talking about street gangs and locking people up. So Anaya, like, do you understand that pivot? Did it make sense for him to pivot into that when talking about cannabis, weed?
The pivot. Now, I would say Shane Hansel, that was a great question. I back cannabis legalizing it because I think it is beneficial to different people, medicinal use, and it is an herbal plant. But Brian Kemp's pivot into becoming a street gang and a drug cartel thing didn't tie into his question at all, because you're getting into something more deeper, as in like the hardcore drugs, like the fentanyl problem and stuff of that nature. So, And
another thing too is that there are a lot of black and brown people that are locked up because of marijuana possession. And that's one thing that the Biden administration has done on a federal level is, they're looking to relax those restrictions on marijuana. So you want to see that on a state level, because there's going to be even more people that'll be released, because it's like you're getting these crazy years just for having a little bit of an ounce of weed. And it's insane.
And if you compare and contrast different drug sentences that people have from weed versus other hardcore drugs, the sentence numbers do not match at all. There's no reason why somebody should get only 5 years for distributing so-and-so amount of crack or heroin, and then somebody else, especially a person of color, getting 15 years for the small usage of marijuana. And
especially when in certain states it's legal. That was the thing that we were talking about with Sha'Carri Richardson, is that where she was in Oregon, weed is legal. You know what I'm saying? So that was what we were talking about. This, you have Colorado, California, you got Oregon, those Western states is legal. So it's like, hey, like because I don't smoke, but what I really want to see is that I want to see the black and brown men, and even women that are in jail, get a shot to revitalize their lives. Because it's like they weren't violent criminals, but they're getting this hard time over a plan. Like, that's the problem. And hopefully that can change whoever is in office. Even though I know I'm voting for whoever's in office, I want to see that change. So Genesis, I want to pivot to you on the back and forth between Shane Hazel and Brian Kemp about cannabis. And Brian Kemp talked about going after street gangs and cartels. Like, I was like, cartels, we talking about power or something? Cartels. So what did you think about his answer?
It would be different if the I don't know his name, the libertarian gentleman. It would be different if he didn't have facts and like evidence into why he wants cannabis to be legalized, but he did. He had all of that, and Kemp still pivoted all the way to the other side to drug cartels, which doesn't make any sense. Maybe Kemp heard what he was saying, and he knows that it makes sense. Like, we are an agricultural based state, and we will make a lot of money off of cannabis revenue and harvesting cannabis. So I guess Kemp didn't have what he needed to answer that question. He didn't want to displease his followers, so he just went straight to what they wanted to hear, which is gangs and cartels.
Yeah, I totally agree. And real quick, I want to spotlight this comment real quick. So, Vince, I got Vince. He said he missed the debate, and someone said in here, you can watch his post. He said he's gonna watch the debate. He didn't want to miss the live combo. So Vince, we appreciate you. We're gonna talk about a lot of great stuff and a lot of the issues. So Vince, we appreciate you. All right. So let's move on. So there was a question for Stacey Abrams. So there was a very plain question. It's similar to what they've been asking Republicans, which is very interesting. So the question was, this election, you commit to accepting the outcome of the vote And it was a special emphasis on the fact in 2020, she, quote unquote, didn't concede. Now, Stacey Abrams has acknowledged the fact that Brian Kemp is the governor. She has on multiple occasions. But in 2018, I personally believe, and people can say this is partisan, and people can say, oh, you're saying that because you like Stacey Abrams, but she had a great reason as to why she felt as if it was rigged. Now, the Donald Trump reason and what you hear from a lot of these folks makes no sense at all, this election integrity point. But he was the Secretary of State, and there were measures put in place to make sure that Black and brown men and women were not voting. Like I said, it's like you're playing basketball and you're the player and the referee. You can't do that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like she had a great reason to feel as if, now let's count these votes to make sure it's right. Then eventually she was like, yeah, I lost, but listen, I'm still going to fight for the state of Georgia, and she did. So Kemp also had to answer that question, and he said yes, he would, and he pivoted into the fact that he said 2018 saw the largest African American turnout, and then you had Shane Hazel that said that Stacey Abrams isn't pushing for ballot access, and he says that 60% of Georgians have no political affiliation, which then Stacey Abrams responded very matter-of-factly that she has pushed for that. And she does believe that there should be ballot access. But I want to go back to the point about Brian Kemp saying that 2018 saw the largest African-American turnout, and also the fact that on his website he touts he's the most voted on Georgia gubernatorial candidate. So I want to pivot to SB 202. So Genesis is on you. So talk to us about that bill and if it's really bad for Georgia, because Brian Kemp was making it sound like it's not bad.
Okay, so I actually did summer research over SB 202. I'm putting on my PowerPoint now. So the reason why the numbers show that African Americans still showed up to the polls is because that's exactly what we did. This SB 202 bill came out and it alarmed us. So we have all these different organizations. We have Democracy Fellows. We have Fair Fight with Stacey Abrams. We have NAACPs all over. We have all of this stuff going on to overcompensate for this bill. And no matter what the outcome was, the intent was still there. So perhaps over time, these numbers will actually decrease. I feel as though that, you know how like you get a new toothbrush and you want to like start brushing your teeth every night like you're supposed to do? Like that's what this feeling is. Or you get a new pair of shoes, you want to wear them every day, but eventually like you start falling off. So eventually this morale and this energy, that the momentum that we have as a people, it's not gonna stay. But then, you know, SB 202 happened after the 2020 presidential election. Is it still going to be the same for primaries? Is it still going to be the same for other elections to come? So SB 202 was a 98-page bill that indirectly targets African American people. So most African Americans don't have a state issued ID. So normally in order to vote, you would just sign your name and that would be how you were identified. But now you need a state issued ID, whether it be a birth certificate or a driver's license or something like that. And not a lot of minorities have things of that nature just at their disposal. The absentee ballot window is also shorter. We vote via mail because we don't always have the means to get to where we need to be in certain communities. The absentee ballot window is closed, or it's shorter, and the early voting window is also closed, and evidence shows that we are the most in Georgia that vote early because we have the families that we have to support, and we work the unusual hours and the strange jobs. And one of the most interesting things about SB 202 is that if you show up to the wrong polling place, instead of you getting a provisional ballot that you can still vote, they redirect you to a whole nother, your correct polling location. Now they say this is to decrease voter fraud, but some of our people, if they are told you can't vote here, you have to go across town to vote, they're not going to go and vote. They're going to turn around. So SB 202 was enacted to decrease morale and decrease motivation amongst African American voters.
Exactly. I remember in 2020, I was working at iHeartRadio. I was an account executive. I was a salesperson, account executive, salesperson, sort of the same thing. And I went to go vote, and it was a super long line. And I had to get to work. And essentially, we had to let our boss know we're going to vote. And he can't really say anything about it at that point because it's like, it's a big push around voting, and we were early. My dad and I went to early vote. Imagine going in there, you got to go to work, and the sales job is more flexible. And you get to the front of that line, you give your ID, and they say, sir, this isn't your polling location. I need you to go to the other polling location. It's across town. And then you have to be to work at a certain time or it's your lunch break. So you're right, like that can depress the turnout. And one phrase I like to say before I pivot to you, Anaya, is regress to the mean. And that's one thing I use in, our business a lot with HBCU Pulse, for example. Like with HBCU Pulse, we get a lot of love on Instagram. We get a lot of love on YouTube. And I'm like, as a business person, I want to have realistic expectations. So it might be one video with a Deion Sanders video that had 1 million views. I cannot reasonably expect that the reel that we post, like what Stacey Abrams saying her cool quotes she said during this debate, that might not get 1 million views. So it regressed to the mean. So it's like, well, okay, so that 1 million views is great, and we're going to benefit off that. It might be subscribers that came from that and the whole 9 yards. But at the same time, I, as a business owner, have to be realistic because it's going to regress to the mean to a point. That's what Genesis is saying. So what do you think, Anaya, about what Brian Kemp said about the rise in minority voting and women voting and all different things he kept pivoting to today?
Now, if you all listen to what he is saying, I think he was scared. If you saw how many people turned out to the polls in 2018 to vote the first time, you got scared, in my opinion. The bill came along to suppress that turnout of African-American voters to vote the next go around. That's what that is. And I like that y'all brought up early voting because today is the early start of voting in Georgia. Today I got a text from my mom saying the polling location she voted at for years, she couldn't vote at because something with her middle name or something wasn't verified with her name. And it was very surprising. I was like, in our family, we've been going to the same voting location for years. So for her not to be able to vote there, just really, I don't know, it made me feel some type of way. Then I got, numerous texts and calls about people having problems at different poll locations when they went to vote, just being uncomfortable and stuff like that. So it's definitely intimidation going around this season in the voting election. And I don't want people to lose hope or lose, what's the word I'm looking for? Discouraged in voting.
See, we right here. I knew you were going to say discouraged. We right here. You feel me? We would have said at the same time, one for the lag. You feel me? We would have said at the same time. All right. But like, no, discouraged. Like that's a real thing. Cause it's like, every person is not going to sit there and wait and say, hey, I'm going to go across town to vote because that's my civic duty. There are some folks that are discouraged from voting because they personally do not believe that voting does anything for Black people. So for that young man or that young woman that, let's say, Genesis encouraged them to vote, or you and I, they went to an NAACP meeting and you encouraged them to vote. And they say, you know what, I spoke to Genesis and Naya, I'm going to go vote. And then they say, hey, you're not registered, or you got to go to this location in Macon or in Warner Robins instead of here in Fort Valley because you're not zoned for this district. That person, that young man or woman is not going to vote because voting should be convenient. And that's really the big thing for me. And this is something I thought about too, is that, Genesis, you ran to be legislative secretary, right? So one thing I see in a lot of HBCU elections is that you can vote online. You can go to the student center and vote, get you some Chick-fil-A, sit down, and then you see who won. People crying, people playing music. They just celebrate. You get a chance. That's an HBCU moment. And you got all these folks that go to these HBCUs. You have a school with 10,000 people, but only 1,000 folks voted. So if people can't vote for the Mr. and Miss of their school or the legislative secretary, what makes you think they got to go out of town? They got to go across town. They got to go to different places, and they're gonna go vote there. If they're not gonna vote for who's gonna put on homecoming. So it's like it's that simple. We gotta look at it like that. Because it's like that's literally an example of access to voting. And if you got like 2,000 students at Fort Valley, but 800 are voting, what's going on? You know what I mean? So it's the same thing here. And that's what, because I don't want to talk. I want to talk to folks like they in preschool, but that's how we got to boil it down. Like homecoming just came up. You want a homecoming concert, but you didn't vote for who was president or who's the CAP president, but you think they're gonna go vote for who's the education, the superintendent of Georgia. Come on, you know what I'm saying?
That's why I think it's very important to keep pushing people. Like I'm a pusher for what is right. So if you're feeling discouraged about voting and you have a problem with voting, I don't hesitate to call me. I will help you. Like, do not give up. Like, I do not want people to give up on voting this election season. Like, do not give up. Just keep going. Like, if they try to stop you, just keep going. Like, you just gonna have to, give in to not letting them take that power away from you, because it's important.
And then we can even go into voting. It should be a national holiday. And I love what the NFL and the NBA are doing, that on the day of voting, there's not going to be any games. And I really love that for what's going on, especially with the NBA really getting behind, a lot of social initiatives led by LeBron James, Chris Paul, a lot of my favorite players. I think that that's amazing. And we should see that follow suit federally and statewide. I want to spotlight this comment real quick before we move on. Deja Brooks said, right, I'm currently going back and forth with my county's registrar for an unnecessary reason. Listen, I know it's crazy, but like Anaya said, keep going. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna figure it out. November the 8th is a long time away. So you're gonna figure it out, you're gonna vote, and you're gonna make sure your voice is heard. All right. So here is another question. And then here's something else he said I don't want to gloss over. Brian Kemp talked about creating online voter registration systems. And once again, he touted that several minority groups have increased turnout in recent years. What I would say here is this before we move on to this question about the sheriffs. I think that is going to be a message that you hear leading into voting. You're going to be watching TV, and I think that Brian Kemp and his crew, I think they're going to start pushing that message out. There is a record number of black folks that voted. It's a record number of minority people that voted. And so the Jedi mind trick, SB 202 ain't all that bad. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that's what's going to happen real soon, because we look at these debates, it's a lot of messaging that happens, and I think we're seeing what the next chess move is. But Anaya, let's talk about this question here. So they opened up the floor for the candidates to ask questions to each other. And Brian Kemp asked Stacey Abrams, how many sheriffs statewide have publicly endorsed your campaign? And I know that, you personally didn't like how Stacey Abrams answered this question. So I want to give you the floor. So why did you not like this answer specifically? And also, just how you think she should have answered it? Because I think she really went on the offensive with this, because she didn't like that insinuation.
Yeah, you could tell she really didn't like the insinuation. I knew her sayings about defunding the police or whatnot was going to be a big deal in this debate, and I felt like that was her opportunity to clear it up or elaborate on more on what she meant. But she didn't do that how I thought she would have. She went and turned it around into what she wants to do or whatnot, or how Brian Kemp treats his backing of the sheriffs as a Playboys club. I feel like she could have elaborated more how she felt about the police and police funding and law enforcement or whatnot, and tied it into different things of how law enforcement could be better when it comes to gun violence and gun control and tackling down crimes that's going on in the city.
And one thing she did as well, she brought up, her two brothers, one that is in jail, and also one that's a social worker that was put over for driving while black. And I was watching the debate with my brother, who's very politically engaged, and he said that, wow, I'm surprised she said that. And I'm not really surprised, because Stacey Abrams has never shied away from the fact that she's a black woman, and she went to an HBCU. And she's been a black woman her whole entire life. A lot of politicians try to shy away from that, even Democratic politicians. They're like, hey, I don't want to speak too much about black issues because I want to appeal, to white voters, to Latino voters. But it's like we're a voting bloc that comes out in support, and black women support more than almost any other group. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you want to speak to these specific issues, and driving while black is something that's very real, although oftentimes we're gaslit to think that it's not. But I want to toss to you and I really quickly before we move on. How did you feel about how Stacey Abrams answered that question?
You mean me or Genesis?
Genesis, my bad. Genesis. How do you think that Stacey Abrams answered that question? Because Anaya, see, I was stuck on what you were saying. You making so much sense. I'm like, oh man, gotta say your name again. But Genesis, how do you think that Stacey Abrams answered that question? Because she has the backing of sheriffs. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and she's done a lot of things. So how do you think she answered that question?
I feel as though even though she was on the defense, she still said she does not make it a habit to keep track on who endorses her, unlike Governor Kemp, because Governor Kemp used that tactic as a way to attack her, and then she deflected it by saying that. So I think even though she was on the defense of that, she stood her ground very well with that statement.
I totally agree. So let's talk about Stacey Abrams' question to Brian Kemp. What are concrete, specific, targeted plans to decrease the racial equity gap currently facing contracting purchasing from minority-owned businesses? And she had a really dope point in her rebuttal. She said, she told Brian Kemp to cheat off her paper in regards to what she said about what needs to be done to curb that gap. And I'm like, Stacey Abrams, she was going for quotables. Now, I have so many notifications on Twitter. I don't get her notifications right now. I need to go in and get them on. But have y'all noticed that politicians, like, they'll say something, and then as they're saying it, their social media team tweets it out? I'm like, listen, you rehearsed that. You rehearsed that in the mirror. You were like, cheat off my paper. Like, she was rehearsing that one in the mirror. She was saying, by the way, cheat off my paper. You know, she said that. You know, so how'd you feel about how this question Stacey Abrams posed, how Brian Kemp answered, and also that point she brought up?
Now, I did hear her state the question, but by that time, my computer cut out, so I didn't hear the responses of that question.
It's all good because my internet went out before the show. Listen, they need to stop the steal. They don't want us to do this show because they know we're gonna get a bunch of HBCU students ready to vote. They don't want us to do it, so they cut the stream and they said Anaya can't watch the debate. She got to catch up later. So that's what happened. But Genesis, I want to pivot to you. So what did you think about that? Because I just thought it was a great quotable. And that's something that, honestly, I'm a business owner, you know, and there's hurdles that as Black and minority business owners, we have to face. So what did you think about how Stacey Abrams answered that question and what Brian Kemp said in response as the incumbent governor?
Well, he really didn't. He always does the whole, when it's like Black Lives Matter, the All Lives Matter, he used that tactic. And then he kind of pivoted into something else because he didn't have a plan. He doesn't have a plan to decrease racial equity gaps for businesses. He said that he wants all businesses, or he's for all businesses to remain open and to increase whatever. And then he mentions COVID-19 and how Stacey Abrams wanted Georgia to say lockdown because of COVID-19. And then he was like, our kids need to be in the classrooms, and they weren't in the classrooms. And that's when Abrams interjected and said he doesn't have a plan. He can cheat off of my paper.
Exactly.
He didn't really have a response.
And I think that even for a politician that is as seasoned as Brian Kemp, he's been in politics since as early as I saw 2003 when he was in the Georgia State Senate. They still just can't get off the plan. And to me, and I'll just say this and then we'll move on, that's what, really dumbfounds me. It has me very perplexed because even when we look at the Raphael Warnock debate, he's talking about what he did and what he wants to do. And Herschel Walker was attacking but not saying any real plans. But I'm hearing Herschel Walker won the debate. Raphael Warnock's inarticulate. And I'm like, huh? And I hear that a lot when it comes to Democratic politicians. They're talking about the issues. Sometimes Republicans, and honestly, Brian Kemp wasn't doing the culture wars thing. He was talking about policy. I will give him that. He was talking about policies. He wasn't like, oh, the Atlanta Braves, oh, this and that. Like, he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about policy and defending his record. But you hear Democrats talk about actual policies and plans, and it's like, oh, they're weak. They're going to lose. Herschel Walker did good. I just don't understand that. But
now, can I add in?
Yes.
I do like the question about the minority and majority business gap, because when you look back in COVID years, that's when you started seeing a lot of Black businesses flourish and open up. And then with us being in the city of Atlanta and Georgia, more Black businesses are coming about. So the tackle on that issue is really important for them as governors, I would say. So for her to ask that question was a really good question.
And then especially when you have Brian Kemp that's touting the numbers of Atlanta being, like the number one city for Black entrepreneurs. He touted that number in his response. So you might want to close that gap, Mr. Kemp. maybe before November the 8th. All right. So let's talk about this question to Brian Kemp that was asked by the panelists. So how will you respond to those who say that you should have prioritized the academic issues? And they're talking about the ones that I outlined at the top of the show that he was saying about education, instead of laws dealing with divisive concepts, parental laws, and obscene books in the past legislative session. And Kemp mentioned HBCUs in his answer about education. I was like, HBCUs. I was like, Drake? Like, what's really going on here? HBCUs. Then I did some research, and I did find this. I did find that Brian Kemp in March 2022, he signed an amended budget with HBCU funding for all 10 Georgia HBCUs, public and private. I could not find that number. And next year, we're gonna fix that with HBCU Pulse. So HBCUPulse.com, subscribe to the newsletter. We're gonna find a number next year. But he did. Now, granted, it was dwarfed by the money that was brought in federally by the Biden administration in the American Rescue Plan, and also the funding that Senators Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff fought for. So I thought that was interesting that he said that. And also I want to point to the fact that the senator race is very important, because I don't think Herschel Walker would advocate like that, because he went to UGA, didn't graduate. He wouldn't advocate for HBCUs like that. And they use it as a talking point. But I want to toss to you, Anai, just in general, not even just the HBCU point, but in general, his answer about education. How do you think he answered that question?
He talked about, I think we discussed this before we got on. He just talked about things he has done or plan on doing. Just like the $5,000 pay increase for teachers, that's not enough. We're at a teacher shortage. So a $5,000 pay increase, what is that going to do for all the teachers across Georgia? It's little to nothing for them. So I just think, it's more we can do for educators, because I value my teachers and my professors before and now. And I feel like, being back in school back then, we took for granted the sacrifices they did for us and the knowledge they're spewing to give us for the future. So I definitely think as far as educating and then educators, we need more. So we need to do more for them so they can help us and other future leaders to thrive.
And what's really important too is that a lot of college students that are graduating in any major, they become teachers. I know a lot of folks that are mass comm majors that, because there's not a lot of mass comm jobs, and I can say that as a graduate, that now can proudly own my business. Shout out to Urban Edge Network. Y'all the goats for real. I just want to say that publicly, as we own HBCU League Pass. Y'all the goats. But like, I finally am able, to do my thing. But I was trying to find jobs, and I couldn't. I did my thing at Fort Valley. I did my thing before I got to Fort Valley. I did internships and all these different things. And I couldn't find a job because radio jobs aren't available because of automation. You have TV jobs that only have reporter jobs. Some folks want to get in entertainment. Some folks want to be meteorologists on a national level. Like, we have different goals in mass comm, and a lot of these students are becoming teachers. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I remember I had a teacher that was my 8th grade teacher that went to Fort Valley. And I remember when I came, I'm like, Miss Lester went to Fort Valley. And she was young. She had to be probably around, I'm 25 right now. So she had to be around my age. And she was super duper cool. She knew what was going on. She knew what was up. And that's what's needed. So imagine having more folks like that with the money being raised. So I think what you're saying is totally important. But I want to move on, because Genesis, I want to pivot this question to you that they asked to Stacey Abrams. They said, given what we know about partisan divides, how will you get your educational proposal passed and funded? And they're talking about specifically about the Georgia state legislature and the Senate. So do you think that Stacey Abrams have a hard time working with, the state legislature and the state Senate if it's Republican controlled, even if she becomes governor?
I know she's going to definitely have a difficult time, but I will say that she gave a great response to that. But those are things that, after that question was asked, I had to sit back and think about it. And it's like, wow, she wants to expand Medicaid, and she wants to focus more on environmental problems. Like, the Congress is not going to go for that if it's still, controlled by the GOP. So that's something that Miss Abrams really, really has to think about. And I mean, I don't know, that's really a tough situation for her.
One thing that you heard Raphael Warnock say in this debate is that he worked with Tommy Tuberville, for getting agricultural jobs for Georgians. He keeps touting, hey, I work across the aisle. And oftentimes Democrats have to say that to say, listen, I'm not going to shut off Republicans because they're a part of the electorate as well. They're citizens as well. And that's a message you see Democrats tout. You don't see Republicans say that. I'm working across the aisle with Raphael Warnock. No, they don't say that. And he say he worked with Ted Cruz. You think Ted Cruz gonna be in Texas when he run? Talking about I work with Raphael Warnock, y'all. No, he's not gonna say that. So Democrats have to often say that to say, hey, like, listen, I can work on both sides. And personally, I just don't see Republicans doing the same thing. So they also asked, how are you going to win approval on these measures with strong Republican competition? But at the same time, it was sort of the same question. And honestly, I think, that she answered the question well. So just for the sake of time, I want to toss this over to you, Anaya. I was watching the debate with my brother, and they asked Brian Kemp, do you wish you made a different choice in choosing Kelly Loeffler for that Senate seat? Because I want to beat him. And my brother was like, what type of question is that? And I was like, like throwing in the bus, Brian Kemp. That'd be funny. Throwing in the bus. But she lost, so I guess I made the wrong choice. That would have been cool. I would have like, Kemp, you got that. You won that round. If he said that. But do you think that question should have been asked for real? Like, do you think that was a valid question to ask, Anaya?
I think some of these debate questions with these debates, I just think some of these questions are just thrown out there for media usage. They just want to stir the pot in these elections. So, of course, it is going to throw in random questions like messy questions like that just to see the reaction he'll say and then what the media will turn around and spin out there. So it was no need for that question, in my opinion.
I think so too. And this is PBS. You know what I mean? Like, this is public broadcasting service, Georgia Public Broadcasting. So it's like if they ask questions like this, Next Star was going crazy. We saw that Warnock, Walker debate. So I want to toss this to both of you all because we're almost done with the questions as we close out the show. So they asked us a specific question to all three candidates, which we're focusing on Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp. The question was, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing Georgia and Georgians, and what will you do as governor to address that issue? So you had Stacey Abrams that sort of ran down the whole platform. Safety and violence, rising home costs, healthcare. And Brian Kemp said, well, let me respond to that. What Stacey Abrams said, yada, 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 but inflation. We're going to stop inflation. And, and Joe Biden, and she wanted to be vice president. And that was his answer. So, I want to go down. So I want to go down for both. So what did y'all think about Stacey Abrams' priorities, what she said? So I want to start with you, Anaya. What do you think about what Stacey Abrams said, what her priorities were?
I love all her platform points. I think she is very dedicated to what she believes in, what she's striving for Georgia. And quite frankly, I didn't listen to other responses because I just knew. But I just know Stacey, she's really dedicated for Georgia. She really is. And I love listening to her and what she's advocating for, because what she advocated for is very important.
Exactly. So Genesis on Stacey Abrams, platform that she brought out when they asked her that question, safety and violence, rising home costs, healthcare, and really sticking into Brian Kemp saying that, he made these promises and he hasn't really done anything, to advocate for this. And I'm going to do that. I have detailed plans. What do you think about her answer to that question?
The thing that stood out the most to me about Stacey Abrams' platform points was definitely about seniors in housing being forced out of the places that they've lived in for years because we are in a housing crisis. And then Kemp during the debate, oh, my dog barking, I apologize. Kemp during the debate said blatantly that he is more focused on the investors in the housing market over the people of Georgia. And that just goes to show how people in the Republican Party think. You are focused solely on monetary value over the lives of Georgians. And so that was very upsetting, very disappointing to hear from Governor Kemp, because we know that Kemp cares about the people of Georgia, but does he care that much if he would rather see these seniors that have been living in these neighborhoods for generations being forced out because of housing issues?
That's a good point. I do think he cares. I'm not even. I think that to be in a position of a public servant, you have to have some care for something, whether it's care for your state, care for your country, care for the people. But I think to a point, they prioritize party over people. Yes. And I think that that's the problem, is that there's a care somewhere, because being a politician is hard. It's hard. It's hard in college, as you both know, to be a leader in college. So imagine that on the inf level. You might be getting paid or whatever on the inf level where you're dealing with all these different things, people coming at you. So I do think that there is a care that's coming from Republicans, but that love for party takes over. And then that's where you get to the Trumpism and to all the different things. The love of party is over the love of people. And when they get that position, they love the position.
Also, with all the, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
With the, the people in the party in your ear, sometimes you're just not one sound. You always have all these people in your ear. You should do this. You need to do this. It's not what you should do for your state.
Exactly. Like Kemp was so worried about receiving approval from Trump, during the Senate races, that he did things that were out of his character because Trump threw him under the bus after Georgia turned blue. And all that goes to show is that you let people influence you and take you away from your morals and your values and your beliefs. That's politics.
That and honestly, that and we won't got time to go into this because I can go on a whole entire thing about HBCUs and student leadership. Don't get me started, because I do that, but it's like you see that everywhere. That's all I'll say. You see that everywhere. I'm not gonna do it. Not this time. But you see it everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like back then they didn't want me. Now they all on me. That's Mike Jones. I don't know if y'all know that. That's Mike Jones. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, oh, like when I was just a student running around, man, y'all didn't say nothing to me. But now I'm in this position. Hey, how you doing? Can I get you a hug? How's everything going? How was Senate meeting? Anyway, so we not gonna get too much into it. So we're almost done, though. We're almost done. So I think that, this part was very interesting. As one of the last questions, they asked, what can be done to make sure that local agencies that are short on officers, and they pinpointed Macon, my hometown, Fort Valley's not that far away, can handle the policing duties without receiving help from the state. And honestly, Macon, leads Georgia and the nation in homicides. And, that's something that, concerns me. You know what I'm saying? My mom's a teacher. My brother goes to high school. My dad is a police officer, so that's something that does concern me. And, and I do hate the rhetoric of what about black on black crime, because with black on black crime, as we said, like those perpetrators, when caught, they're given sentences, versus when we talk about police killings and when we talk about these other things like George Zimmerman, we talk about what happened to George Floyd. Like oftentimes George Floyd, those police officers got justice. All they should have got a little bit more. But
right.
At the same time, it's like that, like black on black crime is not a real thing because there's a punishment for that crime. But at the same time, we do have to talk about, to a point, without that slant, how we can combat what's going on with violence in our communities. It starts with gun violence and also starts with what politicians are doing to curb this. So, what Stacey Abrams said, and I thought it was a powerful point. I believe we can protect the Second Amendment and second graders at the same time. That was a bar. I felt that with a passion. I felt that. Like I said, my mom's a teacher. My brother's in high school. You know what I'm saying? So that really made me feel. And then you had Brian Kemp that said that federal laws require that background checks be conducted. And then Stacey Abrams was like, that's not right. That's not true. And she couldn't get it out. He was still talking, and she apologized for cutting him off. But what she said was true, and I will say it for her before we toss to you guys. That federal law does require that background checks are given to licensed gun dealers. But if you get it from a gun show, you get it from online, there's no background check. And Brian Kemp, governor, that's the problem. So I want to toss to you and I that whole entire conversation. What did you think about that conversation? And honestly, who do you think got the best of that for the voters?
I honestly think when it comes to police and GSP and all that or whatnot, we just need better training. It starts there, in my opinion. We need better training so we have officers and sheriffs and things, them of those natures, tackling certain things better solutions, instead of resulting to more crime and more deaths or whatnot. Now, as far as the gun law, the no background checks for gun shows and online purchases need to change as well, because that's how people are getting guns unlicensed. People are just getting guns. So yeah,
and that's how mass shootings are happening. That's how mass shootings are happening because they're not like a lot of these folks. They're not mentally well, and a lot of these mass shooters, they had documented mental health issues, you know, and then that's the dog agrees with me. It agree with me, you know what I'm saying? Like that, like they see that they agree, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, listen, like that's a big thing. So it's like those background checks are not happening, and I once again want to say that is the problem. So Genesis, I want to toss to you really quickly before we close out. So how do you feel about that exchange? And really, when I ask how you feel about the exchange, who you think won it, do you think that Georgians really heard what Stacey Abrams said? And do they hear sort of the flawed logic that Brian Kemp is possessing? Do you think that maybe won some folks over the Stacey Abrams side about gun control measures?
I feel as though, debate or no debate, the people of Georgia already know who they're voting for. And that's just how I feel. And if Stacy wants to win over those certain people, she's not going to. She just has to get us as African Americans and minorities out to the polls to vote. Now, what I will say about Governor Kemp is that he always used African Americans and gang members and bad people as a shield through this entire debate. He said, lock up, this is in quotation, he said, lock up bad people and that will reduce gun violence. That doesn't make any sense. And I feel as though that this gun violence in African-American communities, yes, it starts with guns, but let's look deeper. Let's get systematic and systemic racism. If all you're around is a community in which the system is built so that you cannot get out of, then of course you're going to result to the same things that have been implanted in your community since the 70s with drugs and things of that nature. So he's going to always use us as a shield and deflect anything because we're the thugs and we're the criminals.
Exactly. That's who he's referencing when he says the street gangs or drug criminals. That's who he's referencing, African-American people. And I hope people realize that.
I think to a point that we realize it. I don't know if, I'm just be real, I don't know if the white soccer mom's going to get that. I'm just going to be real. I honestly, I don't know if she gonna get it. You know, so she gonna be like gangs. You know what I'm saying? But we know some folks that's doing their thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, they do their thing, I do mine. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, because I mean, I'm from Macon, so it's like, you know, I know how it is. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't a part of that. You feel me? But it's like, listen, like you know, but it's like, listen, hey, I got nothing to do with it. You know what I mean? But like, it's an issue, but it's not the domineering issue, and that's the typical Republican strategy. You're creating an enemy. Like that happens all of the time. You have to create an enemy to go after and say, I'm the hero. Almost like, y'all seen The Incredibles? That's what Syndrome did. That, like in The Incredibles, he literally created a whole entire machine and he's like, I'm the hero. But all of a sudden that machine got too big and beat him down. And then the family had to thank you. The family had to come through and knock it down. We the family. All right, we the family. We the family. We're gonna knock that thing down, all right? But no, but like that's real though. So like, there was another question before they went to, you know, the final portion of the debate where they went to the closing remarks. That was, what would you do specifically as a government to recruit and retain teachers? But to be honest, that was already spoken upon, and for the sake of time, we're not going to get to that. But I will say that I do like Stacey Abrams' plan, you know, for education. I really like that. What I will say as a closing remark from me for all of these candidates, I want to see what y'all gonna do for HBCUs. Specifically, my HBCU students or my HBCU alum, Morehouse, Spelman. You have a Georgia State superintendent candidate that went to Spelman, that she's campaigning. I honestly didn't know she was campaigning. You know, those races are very nondescript. I want to know, hey, like, are you going to do an HBCU, K-12 HBCU pipeline? Because you went to an HBCU. That's what I want to hear more of. So we're not going to go deep into that. I know that's what I want to hear. So I want to get you all's final thoughts before we get out of here. So Anaya, final thoughts on this debate. And I want to ask the question, do you think that this debate, because Anaya worded it perfectly, do you think this debate changed anyone's mind, or do you think it was just political theater?
I don't think this one was a political theater as the last one. I think this one kind of opens up a floor of discussion now for people to see, okay, this was part one. Now we have one more to see. And I think it kind of opened the eyes a little more to see, like, okay, what's in store for Georgia come this election season.
So in basketball starts tomorrow. You know, are the Lakers gonna lose? Yeah, they're gonna lose. I mean, I don't know if Stacey Abrams Kemp gonna lose, but the Lakers might lose to the Warriors. But we're gonna see. I'm gonna watch that game. But like in basketball, you know, you have 7 games. You know, if it goes to that point, it's 4 to 6 games, 4 to 7 games in basketball. And football is 1 game to win in the playoffs. And what you do often is that after that first game, you make adjustments. Genesis, you make adjustments where it's like, oh, Steph Curry is going off. He's shooting these open 3-pointers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I keep a defender on him when he goes across the screen. You know what I'm saying? So you're going to see the same thing in the second debate. So what do you think we're going to see as far as adjustments? Do you think that Stacey Abrams is going to stay in the offensive? Do you think that Brian Kemp is finally going to elaborate about her background, what you keep saying? Like, what do you think is going to happen in the second debate?
I think in the second debate, oh, Jen, you can go ahead.
Was it me?
Yeah, Genesis, you go ahead, but now you had a point, so I want to keep the point. Don't forget it. But Genesis, to you.
I was going to say, I was looking at dates because I'm not much of a sports gal, so you were using sports analogies. I'm over here like, okay, how this ties into politics. But I will say that, yes, Miss Abrams was on the defensive, but not as much like as I thought she was going to be. But like what Anaya said, this is basically like opening up the floor for discussion. Now, the viewers and the members of the citizens of Georgia are going to look at this and inquire about each candidate and the things that they talked about, because some of the things that Kemp said, I didn't really know that that's how he felt or that those were his policies. Now, will some votes be swayed? Perhaps so, but for the most part, the people of Georgia know who they're going to vote for, and they know whose policies resonates with them the most.
Yeah, like and the adjustment, and I want to talk to you and I as a final thought, but the adjustment that I see is that I think Brian Kemp's handlers are going to be like, listen, you were way too defensive and you didn't really talk about issues. You gotta go after Stacey Abrams. And to be honest, I mean, I did some electrical consultants for students. You know, I've done that before. And it's like, listen, like you got to stick to the message. You got to go after, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I feel like he's going to for sure go crazier a little bit. He's trying to position himself as, listen, I'm just the governor. I'm chilling. I'm here to help Georgia. But it's like, I feel like he's going to try to land some punches in the next debate. And in the next debate, listen, Shane Hazel, you got a podcast to do, sir. Go to that podcast as we're watching the debate. All right, listen, take your kids trick-or-treating. Don't come, okay? Don't come. Buy some candy and give it to the kids in your neighborhood. But don't come to the debate, okay? Like, let it be between those two, okay? I need you not to come, sir. There's not enough time, all right? Listen, stay home. You know, you can watch it on your phone if you can find it, okay? Because sometimes it's hard to find. Watch it on your phone. As you take your kid around, trick or treat, go home, go to sleep, wake up next day, record the podcast, live your life. You might win the governor, sir. I'm sorry. I'm going to be real with you, okay? I'm just being real. But, like, hopefully he's not a part of that next one, and we can get more of a debate and really a clash between the two ideologies, because I did like how this debate was rooted and centered on issues. But, Anaya, last thought to you. Like, what do you think we can expect from the next debate and the adjustments that you'll see from both sides?
I definitely think Kemp's team will have him coming with more facts and more statements as into what he wants to do to change Georgia. And then as far as Miss Abrams, I think she's good, you know, less on the defensive side, but I think she's good. Her tactics are good. Her speech and plans are well mapped out. So it's going to be a good debate. It was a good first round.
I love it. Yeah, it was a good first round. I'm locked in for, you know, for round 2 for sure. I'm locked in, and we're gonna be watching. We're gonna make it happen. So before we go, and before, you know, we read off, you know, just, you know, some final thoughts for the HBCU community, I want to go in and get where we can find you. So, Genesis, where can we find you on social media?
You guys can find me at Genesis Ivy on Instagram, Genesis Ivy on TikTok, Genesis_Ivy on Twitter, and I think just Genesis Ivy on Facebook. But, you know, we might not use Facebook as HBCU students, but if y'all want to be my friend on Facebook.
It's too much disinformation on Facebook. I'll log into Facebook. I see a new lie every day. Honestly, I do. Like I logged in, and it was a woman, I think, was running for governor. She's like, I told y'all about the vaccines. And I'm like, what'd you tell us? And I'm like, what you talking about, sis? Like, what you talking about? So I'm like, Twitter. I stick to Twitter and YouTube at this point, even though I'll be lives on there too. At the very least, you got folks that check the lives. Facebook, do better, Facebook. What the world? Anyway, Anaya, where we find you on social media? Let us know your Facebook too.
You all can find me at the Anaya Nevaeh _ on Instagram, Anaya Nevaeh _ on Twitter, and Anaya Warfield on Facebook. My Facebook.
Man, listen, Facebook like going to the hood, man. I'm telling you. It's like going to the hood at the point, man. You go to the side of town you're not supposed to be on. You know what I'm saying? Like listen. But really quickly before we go, of course, you all can follow us. Now YouTube has handles. You can follow us at HBCU Pulse on YouTube. So if you're able to find us from there, you'll search us at HBCU Pulse, Instagram at HBCU Pulse, Twitter and TikTok, the HBCU Pulse. We have an ending so you all can see. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So we're gonna have an ending so you all can see, where to follow us at the end. But before we go, I want to give those key dates really quickly. So early voting, like Anaya said, started today. So Saturday voting in Georgia, Saturday, October 22nd and 29th. Our last day to request an absentee ballot is October 28th. Early voting ends on November the 4th. And to register for runoff is November the 7th. All right. So election day is November 8th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. All right. So make sure to make plans for that if you need to, especially with your job. Also, gubernatorial races to watch for HBCU students, because we have a lot of folks that follow, they watch. That this is a very interesting race in Georgia. So just so everyone knows. So, of course, in Georgia, Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp. In Florida, Charlie Crist, who's a former governor, versus Governor Ron DeSantis, who's the incumbent. Alabama, this is the first time, y'all, that two women will face off against each other in the gubernatorial race. We have Yolanda Flowers versus Governor Kay Ivey, who's the current incumbent. So South Carolina, Joe Cunningham versus Governor Henry McMaster, who's the incumbent. Yeah, in Maryland, you have Westmore versus Dan Cox. I got to ask y'all this real quick. Did y'all read the other Westmore y'all's freshman year?
We did.
That's so. Yeah, so Westmore, the original Westmore is running for governor. Okay, not the other Westmore, the original Westmore, because we read that book too. And I'm not gonna lie, I was trying to get my book in the curriculum. They ain't let it happen. I tried two books. I tried Queen's Pay and I tried that. And when I thought back, I'm like, we're gonna have the freshmen reading about high school. I was like, I don't think that was a good idea. That wasn't good. I need to adjust that strategy. But he's gonna be campaigning to be the governor of Maryland versus Dan Cox. So in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro versus Doug Mastriano. In Oklahoma, you have Joy Hofnister, I think I said that right, versus Governor Kevin Stitt, who's the incumbent. And of course, Oklahoma has Langston University, right? So in Ohio, you have Nan Whaley versus Governor Mike DeWine, who's the incumbent. Tennessee, you have Jason Martin versus Governor Bill Lee. And in Texas, which we know is very interesting, Beto O'Rourke versus Governor Greg Abbott. Man, I'm ready for that debate because I think Beto O'Rourke is doing this thing. And I got to watch those debates because I missed them. But y'all, it's been amazing. Hope you all have a great week. Of course, you and Genesis, you have an amazing week. And listen, make sure if you go out and vote, do not let them turn you around. We need y'all to go vote. Let's make a change. All right. But thank y'all so much for tuning in. And as always, we'll see you on the other side.
Like what you hear?
Yeah.
Subscribe to HBCU Pulse Radio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, head to HBCUPulse.com to stay up to date on what's going on in the HBCU community. Thank you for listening to HBCU Pulse Radio.